Hi, I'm Margie Holmes, psychologist, author, and educator. Last week, I mentioned slaying a few more myths about personality types, introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts. Many of you have pointed out the myths as myths. Tanya Garcia, introverts are mistaken as insecure and awkward people who cannot hold a conversation. That is so far from the truth. Most of the introverts I know are intelligent and very aware of what's happening around them. Georgie Tiangco, I think introverts here are not necessarily disadvantaged. Jeruel Rivadeneira, are introverts happy being introverts? As an extrovert, I always thought that introverts lead a boring life. And so all the above, thinking that introverts are disadvantaged, that they live boring lives, cannot hold a conversation, are of course misconceptions, which proves a study that states that introverts have figured out what extroverts are, whereas many extroverts do not really understand what introverts are like. Because if you will notice, all the myths tend to do with introverts being disadvantaged or weaker, etc. I also promise to share the more scientific basis for dividing people into the two personality types. But first, let me share two ways a layman can tell whether one is an introvert or an extrovert. The first is how you like your music. Number two is where you sit in the library. Now, the library was the setting that the scientists studied. But I feel that because not all of us go to a library, I feel that if you also replace the library with a restaurant, you can always tell who is an introvert and who is an extrovert depending on where they choose to sit in a restaurant. The extrovert first likes loud music, and the introvert likes music that is much softer. The extrovert likes to be and likes to sit near the entrance or the exit in case it's not the same. In other words, the extrovert likes to sit where there is a lot of traffic, where there is a lot of people he can say hi and bye to and interact with. The introvert, however, tends to sit in a cubicle when you're in a library or at the far corner of the room when you are at a restaurant, so there is less people to see and to interact with. And then these two layman's clues tie up with the research, which I promise to share with you shortly. But first, let me share what Carl Jung, who coined the terms extrovert, introvert, and ambivert, said. And what Carl Jung said is that introverts aren't necessarily shy or insecure. Extroverts are not necessarily empathic or loving. Again, these are myths that we have, right? The distinction between the two, Carl Jung wrote, is mainly the fact that introverts get exhausted by social interaction, while introverts get anxious when they are left alone. Introverts need solitude in order to recharge, while extroverts draw their energy, recharge from socializing. Or, as Anonymous says, I find for every moment or for every length of time that I spend socializing for my job, I need a factor of ×3 to get back to normal. People just tire me out. Now, to continue, Carl Jung says, the majority of people are ambiverts, not extroverts or introverts, and they are this not because they are sometimes introverts and sometimes extroverts, which is what people, at least the people who wrote to me on social media, tweeted me, answered, wrote on my wall in Facebook, sometimes people seem to think that an ambivert is occasionally introverted and occasionally extroverted. But that is not true. The majority of people are ambiverts because they lie in the middle or under the bell curve rather than at one extreme, which is the extrovert, or at another extreme, which is the introvert. Okay? And this has to do with the way you process information or the kind of nervous system that you have. Now, last week, I quoted Lex Boniface, who said, introverts are just different. That's true. We have a different way of processing stimulus, and that is also true. He's absolutely right, and this is backed up by a 2012 study by a Harvard psychologist called Randy Buckner. What Dr. Buckner found out is that introverts introverts tend to have larger and thicker gray matter in areas of the brain associated with abstract thought and decision making. Now, what this says is that, or at least hints at, is that introverts tend to devote more neural resources to abstract pondering, whereas extroverts tend to live in the moment. So not a lot of their brain matter is focused on how to process all this information. In other words, while extroverts have feelings of reward with their immediate environment, introverts tend to associate with their inner thoughts. Which, again, with this distinction between introverts and extroverts, fits into another study which was done eons ago. And that shows that introverts have a much more sensitive nervous system than extroverts do. In other words, introverts react to stimuli even if it is at a lower decibel, which is why they like their music softer, you see? Because if the music is as loud as the extroverts feel, as the extroverts like, because of their very sensitive nervous system, it is painful to them. It is too harsh to them. Therefore, at a party, for example, an introvert finds a party too loud and upsetting, for example, with people dancing on tabletops, music too loud, people dancing, to the extreme, like with their hands all over the place, because it's just the stimulus is just too much. So the introvert isn't really being a party pooper or KJ. It's just that all the stimulus is impacting negatively to his more sensitive nervous system. On the other hand, an extrovert needs more stimulation. In fact, one could even say he's manhid, that the stimuli has to reach a certain level which is much, much higher than that of an introvert before that stimulus makes an impact on the extrovert. Now, of course, I was just joking when I used the word manhid, but I feel it's okay to joke this way to balance the myth that introverts are so much worse off than extroverts, because nothing could be further from the truth. This we shall discuss in our next episode on Saturday week. Well, that's it for today. Join in the discussion by commenting below. Send me your questions, comments, and suggestions for future episodes on Facebook, tweet using the hashtag AskMargie, or send an email to askmargie@rappler.com. See you next week.